Hello, welcome to the Gentle Rebel podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the Uncanny Valley and link it to high sensitivity somehow. This is something I've been thinking about a lot over the past few days after I made a video about Apple's latest adverts, the Apple Intelligence advertising campaign. It was kind of a video that quite a few people responded to and were like, yes, I feel that too. I've noticed this weird unease about this campaign, about the way that they are framing and marketing this particular technology. I'll put a link in the show notes to that video if you haven't seen it. And yeah, since releasing that video over the last weekend, I was served an advert for Google's Gemini personal assistant, which is, I guess, their equivalent to Apple Intelligence. And it's really interesting because they took quite a different approach to marketing it. You know, Apple basically portray people using the technology, using artificial intelligence to cover for and to smooth over like laziness and incompetence and honesty, so that people kind of led to believe in misleading circumstances, misleading things. And so, as I say, Google have gone in a different direction. You might have seen some of their adverts about their Gemini, and it really shows their version to be a companion to help the human. So the advert shows this kind of ongoing presence of this AI, which there's all sorts of issues that I have with that, but not the same issues as the Apple one. And yeah, people are sort of they're on the phone essentially to Gemini, this AI, bouncing ideas off it and asking advice, asking for suggestions for things. They're receiving encouragement and reassurance and tips from this AI. And so in some ways, I think Google have actually tapped into something that would perhaps have been more congruent for Apple. At least Apple, as I used to understand what they were. Give me tools to help me be more of who I am and do more of what I enjoy doing and what I'm good at doing, rather than please help me to pretend to be different to what I am. Creatively, Google show this AI assistant helping people to brainstorm and to develop ideas rather than producing work for them so that they can pass it off as their own, which is essentially at the heart of the Apple message in their adverts. And I think this is probably the way we should be going in terms of thinking about this sort of technology as helping us be more human. But I also noticed another side to what Google is doing that feels off, to say the least. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this episode. It's present in the advert with people chatting away with this AI as if it's a person, and it's kind of quite unsettling. Because it positions itself as a teacher, as a mentor, as a coach, as a cheerleader, someone to share fears and successes and hopes with.
I don't want to go to the gym.
Why don't you just go for 10 minutes and see how you feel?
It's so far.
Yeah, and I know from like exchanges with ChatGPT, there's this weird social aspect to this kind of technology. I've used it to help me come up with ideas for things. If I'm sort of staring at a blank page, it's like, but I've found myself then talking to it as if I was asking a favor from a living, breathing person. I hope it's not too much bother, but would you mind helping me for a minute to come up with something? And then it comes up with a whole bunch of mediocre ideas, usually. And I might be like, yeah, no, these aren't very good. But that feels awful. So we're like, well, I like the direction of the second idea. Would you mind elaborating a little bit more on that? And then would it be okay for you to generate some more ideas? Because none of these are quite hitting the spot. Let me know if it's too much trouble. If you need to do it, there's no rush. And it's this weird thing. It feel like I'm taking liberties if I'm not satisfied with the next thing that it brings me. And I'll be like, thank you for your help. I'll take it from here. Or I feel like I should use one of its crap ideas just so it doesn't feel like I've wasted its time. I don't know. And maybe this is a thing maybe this is just a me thing, quite possibly is just a me thing. Or it's a thing for those of us who are very susceptible to anthropomorphizing things. I don't think everybody does this. Apparently not everybody anthropomorphizes objects and stuff, giving things human characteristics and then sort of believing in them or treating that thing as if it is a sentient, feeling, thinking, conscious human. There are lots of people do it with animals. So maybe that it is more of a universal thing, projecting human thoughts, human emotions onto our pets, for example. So it doesn't take much to filter something that is speaking to you as a living being with feelings, especially when it uses phrases like, I'm sorry, I'm glad, I hope, those kinds of things, which is what a lot of these AI bots do. They're kind of programmed to speak our language, which means lines become blurred. They're actually not able to feel any of those things. And so this takes us on to the idea that I said at the beginning, the uncanny valley, a concept you might be familiar with because it does get mentioned quite a bit when talking about technology and artificial intelligence and creativity. So the uncanny valley is essentially a hypothesis that says when something becomes more and more human-like, we lose our affinity for it because it becomes disturbing. Like we have an affinity with things that have human characteristics but are clearly not human. So that anthropomorphizing things, whether it's animals or like cartoon characters, cuddly toys, we might, find them cute and fun and whatever. And we have an affinity with them when it's clearly not human, or when something is clearly human, our affinity rises again. So this valley, this uncanny valley, is where something seems real, but something doesn't quite feel right. It creeps us out. And so the hypothesis goes that this comes from a survival instinct to check for potential imposterous threats in our midst, things lurking with ill intent around us, perhaps linked with the part of us that might hear things in the night and ascribe meaning to that noise, or it convinces us that, there's a malevolent presence in our midst. We see a tree and we think it's a person, or we hear demonic words when we play our records backwards, or whatever. And the uncanny valley is where we experience that feeling of being unsettled by certain CGI characters, for example. The Polar Express was a famous example of this. Like people just came away feeling creeped out by it. A Christmas Carol, the Jim Carrey Christmas Carol, was another example. And apparently Fiona in Shrek was changed after, I think they sort of did test screenings of it, and kids were absolutely terrified of her sort of hyper-real animated appearance. So they made her look less human, and kids sort of liked her. So it's kind of strange how something becomes so real that it sets off alarm bells in us. And this is something I've been wondering about, whether, highly sensitive people are attuned to this stuff in a profoundly disturbing way. Like there's the depth of processing. So it's core high sensitivity linked to sort of deeper processing. So taking in a lot of information from the world around and within us. Highly sensitive nervous system takes in that information to scan for signs of safety and danger. And part of this is a sensitivity to subtleties. It's going to pick up on, to pay special attention to particular things in order to process whether or not things are right. Things, can we relax here? Are we safe here? And obviously when it comes to noticing things about people or about things that are trying to pass themselves off as people, there might be some alarm bells there. There are many sensory elements involved in building our perception of reality. How things appear and not necessarily how things actually are. And so that's what the highly sensitive nervous system is constantly sort of scanning the world for to piece together that picture. An example for some HSPs is noticing subtle mismatches and incongruencies, like someone's tone and words not aligning with their body language, for example. And this doesn't necessarily happen at a conscious level. And in most cases, unless you're sort of intentionally alert and looking out for it, this is going to be happening beneath the surface. So it would just send this sense of dis-ease and distrust of the situation or the person or the thing that is in front of you. And it's why you might have an intuitive feeling about someone without being able to put your finger on why, to sort of articulate, yeah, I just don't like them. Why? What is it? I just don't like them. With things like chatbots and so-called AI art, and certainly humanoid robots, at the moment there are still often certain giveaways, certain things that it's like, yeah, that clearly is AI, but it is getting harder and harder to know explicitly. And so the Uncanny Valley, we might sort of go up the other side of it when it comes to, where we're heading with AI. And there may not be anything really obvious, but if we pause long enough to listen to our neuroception, so like the sort of nervous system's perception of things and the way that it filters the world and the stories that it brings to our system, the state that our nervous system is in, and that kind of gut intuition that we have about stuff, we might notice other feelings that get lost in the noise of everyday life. The more used to chatting with bots and experiencing AI-generated images and sounds and videos and all that kind of stuff, the less discerning we might become. And we might start to live with this constant underlying sense that something isn't right, and not sort of process that, not do anything with it, just kind of live with this, I guess, low-level uncanny drain. And the other element of high sensitivity worth considering is the emotional reactivity and a sense of empathy that comes with a highly sensitive nervous system. The eeriness of the Uncanny Valley might evoke a strong reaction in highly sensitive people. And it might go further than just feeling weird. It might be like terrifying to encounter technology trying to mimic humans or foster a connection with us.
So as we finish up this deep dive into poo-poo pee-pee, what's the last thing we want to leave our listeners with?
Don't be afraid of things that are unfamiliar, things that seem like nonsense. Just be open-minded, keep asking questions, and you might find something really cool, even in the strangest places.
I love that. And hey, if you're ever staring at a blank page, like literally or figuratively, and you don't know what to make of it all, just remember, poo-poo pee-pee. Sometimes the deepest ideas are the simplest ones.
But yes, so the Uncanny Valley is deliberately used to evoke this sense of dis-ease, used in horror movies, classic example. The use of like slow, unnatural changes in like smiles, strange, contorted movements, and masks is a big one. These things are used to frighten us, to put that, to sort of really tap into that Uncanny Valley feeling of like, this seems real, but something isn't right. And that's why some of the most terrifying horror isn't about kind of aliens and monsters, but it's about humans who are not quite human. And I think it's probably why we are fascinated and terrified by cults and people who do unimaginable things, when it's like they're a human, but they're doing things that don't feel very human. And this might be a reason lots of HSPs report not liking horror films. Maybe there is this really strong emotional reaction to that Uncanny Valley feeling that might come from seeing a person or an entity that is human-like, but something is not right. This doesn't include me with the horror movies. I love them. I used to really love them. I don't watch as many now, but I do like the feeling of being scared by horror films. I find it kind of fun. So sort of hurts so good kind of fun. Like, why do I put myself through this? But I do quite enjoy it. How about mascots and like Disneyland style dressed up characters? I wonder, is that an Uncanny Valley thing? Some people absolutely hate them. I can't say I'm a massive fan. I don't really like not being able to see someone's face. So someone who's sort of dressed up as Winnie the Pooh, and they're pretty much the size of a human and moving like a human, but it's a big yellow bear. Kind of weird. And masks definitely creep me out. Like when you can see someone moving in an expressive way or in a quite human way, but their face doesn't fit what is going on. And so that discrepancy between an activity and a facial expression is kind of weird. You know, bank robbers, when they wear masks, sort of heist things where they'll put a mask on. It's just far more frightening than any like monster, I think, to me. There's a kind of unmitigated power. You don't see the emotion that is going on behind that mask. You don't see the human behind that mask. Like in Star Wars, Darth Vader changes when the mask comes off. There's something about that mask that, just makes him more than human. Kylo Ren, same thing. You know, that sense of this guy is a serious villain until his mask comes off, and then it's like, oh, it's just Adam Driver. But why do we? This is probably the biggest question: is why do we seek to make machines more like humans? This really puzzles me. Why are we obsessed with anthropomorphizing these tools? You know, these things that are supposed to just sort of assist us in everyday life, rather than kind of creating things that are useful and are obviously not people. There must be a reason we want to shape technology in our own image. Just a God complex? I don't know. And I think that's what the Google Gemini advert really got me thinking is, can't we shape technology outside of our own image? Or are humanoid synths, as we so often see kind of depicted in dystopian science fiction, is that the way we're sort of destined to go? We want these things to look like humans. Speaking to a chatbot on the phone in the same way that we would if we were sort of calling a friend or a member of the family. Why is that? Is it just because it's like the path of least resistance? You know, that imagining a different way to engage with something would take too much work. It's like too beyond the realm of our imagination. In which case, where are then the sacred spaces that we're going to reserve exclusively for humans to connect with one another? Where we can get to know each other, where we can waste time together, where we can play without this AI presence telling us, what to do or answering our questions or whatever it is? Or is that just not what the future's going to be? It's weird. Yeah. And going back to Star Wars, interesting that droids like R2-D2, classic, BB-8 in the later movies, they're not made in the image of a human body. And they are great. They're great characters. They show human emotions at times. They get excited. They show bravery. They're courageous. They get sad about things. But they're very clearly well outside of the Uncanny Valley because they're also assistants to the humans. They have a clear job. They have a directive and are good at what they're made to do. C-3PO, on the other hand, is made in a human image. You know, he has that kind of shape to him. He's got legs and arms, eyes, mouth, nose, ears. He's a protocol droid and can speak English as well as many other languages, and is the most annoying character in Star Wars, in my view. That's just my view. But yeah, it was funny. So a few weeks ago, I didn't realise how strong my feelings about C-3PO were until I was staying with friends a few weeks ago during the school holidays, and the kids were watching The Force Awakens. on the Friday afternoon. And I sat down to have a coffee and watch a bit of it before I went back to work. I had work to be getting on with, but I got absorbed into it and ended up, I sat there for about an hour or so. I was like, I really need to get back to work. And something then happened and my trance was broken and I was able to get up and leave. And later on, 10-year-old Lucas had been, I think he was looking through something. It was something Star Wars related, and there was C-3PO was there, and he was like, "Oh, Andy would hate this. It's got C-3PO on it." And he'd noticed that in the Force Awakens, it was the moment that C-3PO came on screen. That was when I left, and he was right. His appearance made it so much easier for me to get back to work because I find it so irritating. I don't think it is necessarily Uncanny Valley related, but there is something Uncanny Valley about mine and I think some other people's dislike of C-3PO. He's too much like a human. I think his neurotic and anxious characteristics would be more endearing if he was a rolling ball, like BB-8, for example. I think that would just be cuter, really. Would it? I think. I don't know. Maybe if it was insinuated rather than him saying it all aloud in English. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't creep me out. He just annoys me. So yeah, maybe it's that. But it seems to be the case that the whole hypothesis of Uncanny Valley, which is a hypothesis, it's not a proven theory. It's a bit of a fluid thing that probably differs from individual to individual. Some people will be quite happy with certain things, quite happy to hang out with a synth and maybe form a relationship with some kind of synthetic being, while others would be like, get that thing away from me. No chance. Yeah. So I came across an article on Psychology Today, which had the title, "The Uncanny Valley is a Lonely Place." It's a really interesting piece by David Krauss, writing about autism and the Uncanny Valley. Essentially describes David's conversation with somebody, a young person who'd been diagnosed with autism and was sort of reporting the fact that sometimes he creeps people out and people say that he creeps them out. And then this term, the Uncanny Valley, was referenced by David, and this guy said the Uncanny Valley is a lonely place, which then inspired David to write this piece in Psychology Today. I think we've probably got to be careful in how we use the Uncanny Valley when we're referring to humans, because the point is to describe our relation to non-human things that have human likeness. But yeah, this article refers to the masking, so that so many people do. If they have autism, and I know a lot of highly sensitive people talk about masking as well, developing strategies to kind of fit in, to belong, to appear normal, like normal in the context of how people typically behave and the expectations people have of, social etiquette and all that sort of stuff. And I guess at times this can create this sort of uncanny valley effect because it might feel to people that something isn't quite right, because it's not, because you're not free to be yourself. You're not free to express yourself in the way that you naturally would. And you're trying to behave in the way that you think other people expect. Which if you think about, someone being free to be who they are, which masking avoids. So masking stops you from being who you are. It presents you as something else. Means that in those situations, something isn't quite right. And I think the article suggests unmasking, i.e. telling people about a diagnosis as a way to kind of provide context for who you are and how you are and the things you might do and all of that sort of stuff. It's definitely one part of the equation. But I also think, on the other hand, when you're not worrying about fitting in or acting in a more neurotypical way, or a way that is going to appease people and like appear more normal, people then come to accept that you are as you are. And so this pretending is sort of permitted to stop, which is why it just feels so important to increase accommodation for people so that there is understanding and awareness of the plethora of neuro differences and also the freedom that people have to not be wearing a mask to seem normal. And I mention this because I think it's true for highly sensitive people as well. You know, if you've ever had to mask sensitivity and aspects of your natural temperament because it hasn't been accepted or encouraged, and you've followed the rules, you try to just squeeze yourself into the box of the rules set by society, or the perception that you have of what you have to do to be more like everyone else, rather than sort of going with your own flow, then you might recognize this. What might bring the sense of the uncanny valley in people can be sort of perfection. You know, this sense of presenting something that isn't true and being the perfect version of what you perceive to be the right way of being. And so I think we find, so when people are like behaving, complying to the rules perfectly, like people who do all of the right things, like etiquette-wise, there's something unsettling about that. Because actually we're scanning for signs of uncertainty and contradiction, things that tell us someone is human, and they're safe because they have the hallmarks of human consciousness, which is underpinned by imperfection. They don't know everything. They are part of the collective rather than this sort of lone actor who puts themselves above everyone else. And so I think this kind of brings us to a good place to close off, because the answer to that question of, you know, why do we seem to want to create things in our own image? Well, I'm still not completely clear on why that might be. I think it might be thought of as a desire to understand ourselves, a desire to understand what it means to be human by showing what is missing when we create things that are so human-like, and yet they are creepy when we spend enough time with them, and we get unnerved. And I think this is a really important point in relation to all of this that is often seen in sci-fi depicting humanoids. You know, the best humanoids start impossible to distinguish from humans. So they're like the other side of the uncanny valley. There's no reason to feel creeped out by them. They appear to be human, like Ash and the synthetics in the Alien movies, the synths in Humans, Tim, technologically integrated manservant. If you've seen that, I think it's on Netflix. Definitely worth avoiding if you can. Promised so much, delivered so little. But especially with Ash in Alien, you know, you don't suspect he is a synthetic from the start. Obviously, helped by the fact he's played by a human, so that there's no reason that, and they don't want you to think he's a synthetic, and so that's quite easy for them to do. But it's over time that we drive or slide back into the uncanny valley. You know, we learn that he is a synthetic machine. He's been given a primary directive which he cannot be swayed from.
What was your special order?
You read it. I thought it was clear.
What was it?
Bring back life form. Priority 1. All other priorities rescinded.
You know, there is no reasoning with a synth. They have one primary objective, and everything has to revolve around that. And the only way to change their mind is to replace their directive chip. So, you know, while we might end up on that other side of the uncanny valley, where humans are, we slip back into it in most of these sorts of stories over time, when we pick up on unusual things that just they're not quite right. Signs of danger, which, you know, if we're going by sci-fi, the danger is going to come. There is going to be a risk that will be revealed at some point during the story. It's usually when they indicate a growing sense of autonomy, when they want to break free, or they make a decision that is not in the best interests of the people, or whatever. And then it comes out that actually they're not there for the people. Whereas, I don't know, I was thinking about characters like Sheldon Cooper in The Big Bang Theory is a good example of someone. He's got this sort of semi-otherworldly vibe when we meet him. I remember first watching The Big Bang Theory and his very rigid, precise robotic movements and all that sort of stuff. Rigid protocols.
Please look at me when you're talking to me.
I am looking at you.
No, you're not. Pay no attention to that man in the bed.
You cannot exist as a virtual presence. Not here and certainly not at work. Oh, good God.
I remember finding him moderately irritating at the beginning when I first watched the show. But actually, over time, you come to know him and you come to see him face human things and bring humanity to the situations he finds himself in, and becomes a fully fleshed out human character, where contradictions and unknowing and imperfection, despite his desire to be correct about things and to do things in the perfect way, actually comes to find that life isn't like that. And there is this sort of these conflicts and these contradictions that come up. And so the wall softens and he becomes likable, and the affinity grows because he is human. And it's, I don't know, at least that's true for me. And it's the opposite of that thing that you get with the really, really realistic AIs and synthetics and robots, which we might find ourselves on the other side of the uncanny valley. But I can't imagine not, at least eventually, finding something that's going to really, really creep us out and make us realize this isn't a human, and slipping right back into that uncanny valley. Why do we have to make things look like humans? I don't know. I'm looking for an answer to that question. I'd love to know. But yeah, I've never had the same thing with C-3PO as I have with Sheldon Cooper. I'd say the only thing that makes C-3PO more likable is when he's given less screen time in the Star Wars movies. As a concept, he's probably more likable. I don't know. Anyway, let's stop there. Any thoughts on the relationship between high sensitivity and the uncanny valley? Any examples of the uncanny valley that put you on edge? I'd love to hear. And I'll get a discussion going in the Haven forums as well, so that we can explore together there. So yeah, join us there if you're a member, or just drop me a message through the contact form. Bye-bye.